Hey everyone, it's Caroline, and I'm super excited to share with you. Today I'm celebrating the anniversary of 4 years in business. And so I thought, both in celebration of this anniversary and kind of reflecting back on this time and what I've learned from this experience, I thought would be really helpful for those of you who are either just starting out your career change journey, or just, maybe you're in the throes of it and just need a little inspiration. It's a little squishy, the timeline, when I kind of officially start the count. But I think for the purpose of today's video, I'm starting it with the launch of my first blog post. And so I'm marking today's video from the start of this blog post because what some of you might not know is a big reason for me leaving corporate and starting my business was because I wanted to write. And maybe even as much as I wanted to coach, I wanted to be writing for public consumption. And what I've shared here and there, but I don't make a big deal about it because it's not about me, it's about you all. I'd barely written a word in about 20 years prior to writing this first blog post. And so it's not just about kind of, all right, I sat down to write it and launched it. It took me a lot of work, internal work, getting over gremlins, getting over limiting beliefs to even hit send. And like I just said, even I would say the first couple years when I would share the posts, I would just be gripped with anxiety and fear and, dare I say it, shame actually about, kind of the quality of what I'd written. And so I want to share this with you today because I didn't know at that time when I was writing those first few blog posts, I didn't have this grand vision for my business. I mean, I had this broad inkling of what I wanted. I sensed at some level that it was possible, otherwise I wouldn't have done it. But there was no first I'm gonna launch this blog and it's gonna, result in X, and then I'm gonna do this other thing. It was really, just a real leap of faith and trusting and having patience that, number one, doing something I loved was going to lead to something, and just also staying open to where the process did lead me. It's interesting looking back on that time. What did I know about what I wanted for my business? I had this really vague vision of rolling my suitcase through an airport, for leisure travel, not business travel with my laptop and that you're getting up at 5 a.m. and kind of that constrained travel for our corporate jobs. But I just had this vision of being in the clothes that I like to wear and traveling in the middle of the day according to my schedule. That was my grand plan for my business. And so I'm sharing this because I think it underscores the importance wherever you are in kind of your career journey or your business journey, just taking those steps, right? And setting up those systems. When I launched my blog, I wrote once every 2 weeks, which I look back and I was just like, wow, that's so it's just a drop in the ocean, right? No one's gonna see this. No wonder no one read it. No wonder no one commented on it. But to me, I don't know what I was doing those 2 weeks, but the writing of that particular blog post for that, that day that I was gonna launch it, it took forever. I would spend hours over days to write 800 words. So there was a lot of energy and feelings around these posts. And yet there was something about that commitment I made to myself and to, presumably, I imagine there would be readers out there, that commitment as I was sending it out to my email list that, I'm gonna send this every 2 weeks on Tuesday mornings. And just trusting that was gonna result in something. And so I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned, and I encourage you to step into, is, I've talked a lot about systems. I might even have an early blog post I wrote about systems. I'll take a look at it. If it's not too terrible, I'll share in the link below. But it's so important to set up these regular daily habits. I think it's so easy to get caught up and get overly fixated on what does it look like? What are all the blanks that we need to fill in? I need this crystal clear picture. And to the extent that you can do that, great. And at the same time, I think it's equally or even more important to start taking steps towards that, right? Take the steps towards the things that you know, and just, like I said, trust that the rest is going to be filled in. And the other thing I learned, along with just kind of taking these steady steps, trusting the process, having patience, having those building blocks, making that steady commitment to action, repeatable commitment to action. I think that's also important, is this idea of changing your orientation to failure. Now, if you've read anything I've shared in the past, I was gripped by fear of failure. So I'm not suggesting at all, and I think too many people focus on being fearless or pretending like the fear is not there, or pretending that the fear doesn't bother them. I actually don't advocate that. I feel like it's much more healthy, right? Fear is there to protect us from something. And I think it's a whole heck of a lot healthier to acknowledge that, to really get at the root of what are we afraid of and what is the protection here, so that we can move through it in a way that actually feels good, right? Not pretending it's not there, not gaslighting ourselves or being in denial, but really working within it. And I feel like not only is that an important muscle to flex, but over time, one of the things I'm proudest of actually is my orientation to failure has completely changed, right? Which is not to say that I don't, have that fear, and especially as I step into kind of new areas where I'm like really stretching myself or getting out of my comfort zone. But I really accept fear and also the idea of failure as part of the process, right? It's like, I'm just ready to fail. I'm ready to fail. I see it as a necessary step. And when I accept that, it just takes the sting. It lowers the stakes around any particular failure. If I added up all the failures, I'm not even sure, I'm sure an outside person could be like, oh, failed on that, Caroline, failed on that, screwed this one up. I think it would even be hard for me looking back to recognize things as failures that pre-leaving corporate and starting my business I would have been so afraid of. But I think also even when I recognize them, I just interact with it so differently. I'm like, okay, this is helpful information, as opposed to making it mean something about me intrinsically, as opposed to kind of over-personalizing it and being like, oh, this means I can't run a business, or I don't know what I'm doing, or I'm too stupid, or not good enough, or all of those messages we tell ourselves. And just seeing it for what it is, which is just a missed outcome, right? I expected X to happen, Y happened, and so now what I'm going to do about that. So I also encourage you to really, accept that, accept failure as part of the process. And, your journey might be different, right? I'm not saying my orientation is the one for you to adopt, but I think one thing that really helped me, which I encourage you to try on for yourself, is, despite all this not knowing in the beginning, despite having this like vague image, despite being gripped with failure, if you've read my stuff, I've talked a lot. Like, I seriously thought that I was going to end up penniless and homeless. It sounds funny. It sounds like I'm joking now, but this was a very real, palpable fear. This was an outcome that I really saw as a potential, as a likely scenario for me. And so I invite you to, so what I was saying was, one of the things that was very helpful to me was saying, all right, failure is a potential outcome, and it's much more important for me to try and go out in a blaze of glory than to not try at all. And so I just invite you to ask that question of yourself. And you might do the calculus and maybe it's not worth it to you. That's fine too. So I hope this has been helpful in terms of sharing some of my lessons, and I would love to hear your thoughts below.